Hello, everyone. Welcome to Random Encounter 296 or 296. My name is Jono Logan, and we're doing something a little different today. So usually on Random, we chat about games from a critical point of view. Usually what happens is one of my reviewers comes on, and we talk about their review of a game, what they like, what they didn't, what worked, what didn't. And then we have some fun discussion questions, that kind of thing. And this week, we're going to do something very different. Something that has always fascinated me since I found my passion for video games was video game development. The people who actually make the games. Whenever there would be like a little feature or something in IGN magazine, which would show, oh, the developer's hard at work, I was like, wow, people make these things? And I'm pretty well acquainted with the process of making quote unquote art. I worked for years in theater. I wrote stuff. Today, I host and edit Random Encounter, which is a kind of art, podcasting. But video games, see, I think that's a whole other level because there are so many components that go into a game, from writing the story, dialogue, to the graphics, to the programming, to the music. The programming is the thing that actually allows it to be played. And then there's the business side of things, which is an entirely other massive endeavor. And if you're on the indie dev side of things, you have the issue of finding a publisher, which comes with its own headaches, including like, how do you market your game? How do you create a marketing campaign to get your game out there? In other words, it's an insane amount of work, especially for massive publishers and devs like Ubisoft or Square Enix. And that's why I personally have always been in awe of indie developers, because they do everything that a massive developer does with an exponentially tighter budget, way fewer resources, and let's be fair, less pay for the people in charge, usually. It's a tight wire act. And while there are a bunch of really great documentaries about game dev on YouTube, if you're wondering, NoClip does great stuff. The Double Fine Adventure documentaries are ridiculously incredible. It's a rare treat to actually get to talk to some actual indie devs who have successfully created and published a game. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing today. And I kind of have hopes that this episode might be a help to anyone out there who has thought about sitting down and creating their own indie game. So I happen to be very, very good friends with two such individuals. And they are two of the gentlemen who are responsible for the creation of the indie adventure game Lil Guardsman that released in January this year, 2024. Lil Guardsman is a cross between a LucasArts-style adventure game in terms of the point-and-click mechanics and the humorous tone, and Lucas Pope's 2013 indie hit Papers, Please, which would best be described as an immigration officer simulator. Otto reviewed the game a few months ago, giving it a 90 and an editor's choice. We chatted about it on the show before. And little disclaimer here, I've known both of these gentlemen for decades. We're friends. So take that's how I got them on the show. I assure you, I will be as hard-hitting as always, but just so you know, I know these guys. So joining us today are the head of production and the co-founder of Hilltop Studios, Scott Christian, and one of the writers and an actor in Lil Guardsman, and I believe an extraordinarily talented actor and director working on stage across Canada, Jeremy Lapalme. Hey, Scott. Hey, Jer. How you guys doing?
That was an amazing intro. Bravo, Jono.
Yeah, you just fire that off, huh?
Jeez.
That's really impressive.
It's like I have a degree in presenting stuff.
I was just going to say, it
does sound like that.
And
yeah.
you make us sound incredibly legit. So thank you for that.
I know, it's amazing.
That intro immediately got my imposter syndrome just fired up on all cylinders. I'm not going to lie to you, but I really appreciate the kind words.
Well, certainly. Jeremy, you and I first met at Sheridan College on our first day of the music theater program. My memory of this is we first met playing a game of pool.
That sounds about right. Probably at Monahan's. The theater life, for those of you who aren't personally involved in it, it's a lot of pool. It's a lot of bar games and things like that. So yeah, that sounds about right.
Yes. And Scott, I believe you and I met first time through a theater company, a defunct theater company, sadly, called Theater 20. It was a Canadian music theater company. I believe that's how we first met.
Yeah, I feel like our friendship started mostly with me behind the piano when you were singing.
Yeah, actually, I think that's the first time we met. I was either singing something of yours or I was singing, no, it was, I can't remember who wrote it. Something about a Canada Council grant.
Are you ready to receive critical feedback for that performance 12 years ago? Is now the time?
I absolutely will. I'll make sure that it's edited right into the episode.
It's glowing feedback. Listener, if you haven't heard, Jono has a beautiful singing voice.
Oh, they've all heard the karaoke episode. All right. Well, Scott, I know you as a music director and a composer working in the Canadian music theater industry for years and years. What made you decide to first pivot and then move into the indie video game development space?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, I certainly wear my musical hat on the games that Hilltop makes. But yeah, it's been quite a journey. And I'd say it started at the beginning of the pandemic. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. So in Toronto, Canada, when COVID hit, our government took it very seriously and everything shut down in Toronto. It was one of the longest lockdowns sort of in the world was in Toronto. One of my best friends from university, Artiom Komarov, and I were both sort of stuck at home. His background is as a tech entrepreneur and a business guy, but he's a deeply nerdy gamer like myself. And he's a visual artist. And I'm a story guy and a theater guy and a composer. And we were hanging out during the pandemic and just started having a bunch of sort of what if conversations about video games that we love. And then I don't know which of us said, well, like, should we try making one? And I think the conversation really started as a lark. And then it just kept going and got more and more specific. And then I think his entrepreneurial brain kicked in and sort of bullied me into actually making good on these sort of imaginative dream conversations. And we started sort of forming the idea for Lil Guardsman. And then as we were sort of figuring that out, we sort of started forming the idea of like what we think an indie studio in Toronto could look like if we were doing it.
When you first started out, what kind of games did you have in mind? Did you want to, right off the top, create a point-and-click adventure game like Lil Guardsman, or do you have some other ideas?
So I feel like to recall it, I'd have to be on a bicycle. So one of the things we did during the pandemic is we took these being stuck at home and not being able to go out to restaurants or bars. We started doing these like basically building up to 100-mile bike ride. So a century ride. So we were doing these crazy long bike rides, becoming deliriously tired, and good creative ideas start happening when you're deliriously tired and physically exhausted. And
I can totally see the two of you driving by on a bicycle built for two, going around game dev ideas.
I really wish it was like that with like a really cute basket and like tassels coming out of the handlebars.
That's exactly what I was picturing.
Well, there you go. No, I don't know if we started with an adventure game, but we definitely started with what's a game that we could actually finish, or what's a game if we sort of set out to make it with a small team, could we actually go left to right on? Because I think I have to imagine a lot of those conversations start with and I mean, we made our dream game in so many ways, but if our dream had been something massively multiplayer, I think that would have been really adorable. So yeah, there's a couple of thematic and tonal and character things that were early on, but really it was just like, what is the shape of a game that we think we could make with an extremely small team?
I feel like maybe at the beginning of any endeavor, whether it be doing theater or I guess in this case, doing a video game, there really does need to be an element of, I think it was Lil Rascals being like, let's put on a show in the garage. I can bring my mom's curtain. We can use it as a curtain. And like that kind of mentality where you just have to start doing stuff. And then once you start doing stuff, it builds up onto itself.
And I think it sounds very sort of anti-creative, but figuring out what your limitations are and what your constraints are early is such a good sort of like that fosters, I think, the brilliant creative ideas. So because Artiom is a visual artist, and because we started with characters, we started just sort of imagining this cast of characters, and we very early we were like, okay, we like classic fantasy. We also like comedy. Where do those two things sort of mash up? But we were thinking like, okay, if Artiom is responsible for all of the art in this game, which ultimately he wasn't, our team became an art team of 3. If Artiom can generate lots and lots of characters, but if he also has to generate lots of locations and backgrounds, that'll kill us, or we won't be able to finish. So we can't. That would kill our scope. That would make it too big. So we were thinking like, okay, like what's a sort of limited location that we can tell a big story in? And I think an early idea was, okay, what if we locate it in a house? So you just have to figure out a house. What if it's like a haunted house, sort of pure story, Resident Evil walking simulator thing? Like that was an early, like, how can we not kill ourselves on on locations. And that's when we got I can't remember how Lucas Pope's games came up, like Obra Dinn and Papers, Please. But pretty early, we definitely sort of struck on the, okay, if we locate our character at the castle gates with this cavalcade of characters coming in, we can tell an epic story, even though it's sort of a fixed point for the protagonist.
Jeremy, I know that, again, you come from a solid theater background. I know your entire career because I was there for most of it. I was curious. I want to talk to you about your storytelling shop. So Scott's making the game. How did you become involved as a writer?
Scott approached me, I guess fairly early on when they were preparing to make a demo, to make something that they could, a small template they could send around and pitch out. And he came to me with the caveat that they were going for comedy. They wanted a comedy to be the main flavor of this game. So he came to me and my writing partner, Matt Bernard, to join them and to take these characters and at the guard shed situation and create a few turns, which is what we ended up calling the people who come through the gate. These are a sequence of turns, like they're individual mini puzzles, to find some ways to make them funny and explorable. You can, within the character, you can kind of use the character as a bit of a map and explore around and get different outcomes for each of them.
Yeah, and I think, Jer, I feel like I came to you first as a voice actor. Like, I think you popped into my head as like, oh, Jeremy has lots of great funny voices. I want him for this. And then I think it was probably as I was preparing my sketches and my sort of first drafts of the turns, sending it to you, that it was sort of the eureka moment of like, oh, I should have Jeremy and Matt sort of join me in writing this and punching it up from a comedic perspective. And then I think through making the vertical slice, making the prototype that we then pitched to publishers, it was like, oh, there's something really special here about the three of us working on this.
Yeah, we found that our sensibilities, our tone really matched. By the end of the game, we had a discussion, the three of us were like, I can't tell who wrote what, because one of the main goals for us was to try to voice match each other to make sure that, especially for Lil, for our protagonist, that no matter who wrote this character, it wouldn't sound like three different writers. It would sound like a cohesive unit. And I think we found that pretty quickly, that we had a very similar sensibility of what made us laugh and what we thought was funny and would be appropriate for the tone of the game.
Well, Matt Bernard happens to have delivered the funniest wedding speech I've ever heard in my entire life at your wedding, Jeremy. I can't remember the details of it. I do remember that at one point, I think it was to save you and your wonderful wife some grief, he made cardboard cutouts of the two of you for pictures.
Yeah. I think his idea was something about going into the future, and in the future he saw that Gabby, my wife, was Queen of Canada, so he had like superimposed her face on a cutout, on like a life-size cutout of Queen Elizabeth, and I was this star of romance novels, so he cut my face out and superimposed it on like this topless Fabio kind of thing. So we had those that people would take pictures with at the wedding. Yeah, he's a real piece of work. Yeah.
Incidentally, I mean, I think the world of both of you, but compare my opinion compared to my opinion of Gabby is you guys are garbage. Gabby is, for many people, Gabby already is the Queen of Canada. Gabby Epstein, just one of the best music theater actors in this country, and I would argue in North America.
How much is she paying you for that promo? Wow.
Yeah, Gabby just brings that out in you. She's just wonderful. Anyway, let's actually go back to talking about the game instead of fawning about your wonderful wife.
Sure.
Wow, you jumped on that real fast, Jared.
Believe me, I talk about my wonderful wife all the time.
I'm done with that. Jer, you actually, as Scott mentioned, you play a couple of the characters in Lil Guardsman, and I think one of the best things about this game is actually the voice cast. They're Canadian. I'm super proud of that because I'm Canadian. But they're also unique and interesting characters that would have been a perfect fit in LucasArts or Sierra adventure games from the 1980s and 90s. What was the process of creating these characters? Jer, I know that you ended up acting as a few of them. I imagine that impacted the way they were written. So like sketches were drawn up and you just started, using voices and saying, okay, what would this character sound like? And that would influence the writing?
Yeah. The process for creating the characters it kind of ping-ponged around. It would start with the written word, the character that we would create, these turns, we would send a description of the character to our animation team, who would send back their first drafts of different characters, and we would see what they had offered, because they were very much offering comedy in their own, and then we could take that and, I love just the certain look that someone's giving, so we can incorporate that more into the dialogue and into the writing. It kind of had a positive loop going that way. And then once they were made, we were able to then create voicing for them. Although I did know that there were a few personal voices that I've done in my life. And I'm like, okay, I'll probably go something like an old-timey prospector for somebody, or for one of my favorites to do is it's a take from Monty Python. They call them the pepper pots. The spam these kind of ladies who won't talk up here. This kind of these voices. So it was a joy to be able to play matchy and figure out which voices would want to go with each character.
I can imagine that would be a lot of fun. And I imagine it was a lot of fun also casting the game.
Yeah, we're just spoiled for amazing artists. That Toronto has an incredible theater scene, and Scott, I know that you a lot of these, Scott brought on the voice cast and found and tapped some really amazing people to be involved.
Yeah, I basically plundered sort of some of the funnier theater actors that I've worked with, but I also work as a musical director, or have for a number of years, at Second City here in Toronto. So I feel like I know a lot of nerdy comics, so nerdy comedians who just sort of came in and did it. And one of the things I'm most proud of with the game is we engaged like 13 actors to play 100 characters. And I feel like it really feels like a much bigger cast than that. I really feel like there's not too many moments where you're like, hey, I think that's the same person. I think that's the same voice I just heard. I feel like it really feels like 100 sort of breathing, unique, bizarre characters. I
agree with that, actually. Okay, so you have your idea, you have some art, you have the major strokes of the story, you have some characters. Scott, I wanted to ask you, your background, I know your background, it's as a musician, a composer, a music director. If you're going to make a game, I imagine that you needed to pick up some new skills. What was the process of picking up some of the new skills that were necessary for learning how to make a game?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like one of my co-director, my co-founder, Artiom, and my skills is we know our strengths, and I think those are many, but we also are very comfortable sort of acknowledging where we need brilliant people to sort of come in and pick up the slack. So at the end, the sort of core team for Lil Guardsman was 7 people, which I think is very small, but I think we just had 7 brilliant people who each did about 3 jobs each. And that's what made it sort of the game that it is. But yeah, we really didn't want our team to ever crunch. And in order to do that, I crunched a lot. So I feel like to make sure that everyone else could sort of close their laptops at 5 p.m. Meant that I seldom did. So yeah, it was quite a learning experience. I wouldn't say I became a programmer through this, but I definitely figured out sort of the monkey level of programming that I could take off of our killer sort of developers plate. So while they're figuring out how to make the game work brilliantly and way beyond our expectations, I was the one doing the like the brute input stuff and making sure the scripts and the logic all sort of happened. So yeah, it was definitely boot camp. But yeah, I mean, I think it's like surround yourself with good people. And for Artiom and I think we both got really good at giving sort of clear direction and clear feedback, and then being very comfortable when what comes out or what the team generates isn't exactly what you pictured, but it's still great, and being comfortable with that, and not like, yeah, but that's not how Lil's bedroom looked in our heads. But it's like, no, it's way cooler, and it's different.
A collaborative approach. It has to be.
For sure.
What engine did you use for the game? Because I know that you guys knew some studios go about making their own engine. Nowadays, that is I think, unnecessary, especially for an indie studio. You guys looked around, I imagine, at the various engines out there. How do you pick the one you chose?
Yeah, I think we sort of started with sort of the lead developer, and that's a gentleman who's based in Colombia. Our team, we're a bunch of the core team members are here in Toronto, Canada, but the complete team is all over the world and in Latin and South America. So our lead developer is Italo in Colombia. And he had made a couple of smaller games sort of along the same lines. So when we interviewed him, we just it's like, oh, you get this. And oh, you've built things that sort of are related enough that we sort of felt very comfortable hiring him. And he was very experienced in Unity. So Lil Guardsman is built in Unity. And then the other sort of complementary tool that we used is called Yarn Spinner. And Yarn Spinner is like Twine. There's a couple of sort of solutions for narrative games that make it sort of easy for folks like Jeremy, Matt, and myself, who are writers first, to implement the sort of conversation puzzle logic. So it's sort of this tool within Unity.
That's a good pivot, actually, into the gameplay. So Lil Guardsman isn't just a point-and-click adventure game. It's also, and I realize this is an awkward phrase, it's a Papers, Please-like. And in Papers, Please, you're a border guard of what appears to be a fascist or communist Eastern European country, and you're tasked with allowing people into the country or restricting entry. And the decisions you make in that game are, frankly, harrowing when you need to choose between letting someone in who could free the country or be paid that day so your child doesn't starve to death. It's probably one of the hardest games I've ever played. And I don't mean that in terms of the difficulty of the game. I mean that in terms of the difficulty of the choices.
The emotional toll, yeah.
Oh, God, it's just deadly. It's brilliant. The stakes in Lil Guardsman are a little less soul-destroying, but in many ways equally hard. And I think that the gate mechanics are where many of the best puzzles in this game are. And of course, that is one of the most important parts of an adventure game. So right off the top, the way the game is structured, I think, is really, really clever. It's structured into essentially days rather than just it provides a nice story beats and things like that. But each day is anchored by Lil is the main character. She's the Lil Guardsman. It's anchored by her shift in the guard shed. And usually per day, you see about 5 people who want to get in, and you need to figure out whether or not to reject them or to allow them entry into the Sprawl, which is the magical medieval-esque kingdom. What made you choose the level structure for the Guardsman segments? Just because it was more manageable pieces?
I think early on we were thinking about the guard shifts, them as these like sort of segments of her on the job, and then everything sort of the more traditional adventure game stuff when you're walking around and exploring as seeing the sort of the fallout or the payoff of the choices that you've made in the guard shed. I mean, there's some question of like, are they sequential? How close are these days to each other? I don't know. Jeremy, do you remember those conversations very early on?
Yeah, we had talked about the idea of it being like, is this a week? Is this a month? And we kind of decided that it would go in a chronological order. Like each shift does follow the other. The events of the previous shifts and will have impacts later in the game. But we didn't want it to be like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We thought that we could have a little more breathing room if we just kind of leave that to the next relevant day. Is effectively because Lil, the reason that Lil is running the guard shed, it's her father's job, who at first he's got more pressing things to do, namely betting on the goblin ball down at the pub. So he's going to put Lil in charge, cover his shift while he goes off, and then after your first shift, you do such a noticeably improved job from your dad that the powers that be find ways to insert you and to continue having you work at the guard shed. So each shift is kind of the next relevant or the next impactful day.
And I think that one of the best things about the level structure is that it does allow you to ramp up the importance of each shift as the story progresses. So off the top, it's who cares? Just let people in, let them go. It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, quote unquote. But by the end of it, you're dealing with a war-torn nation, and the people that you allow in can be refugees or they could be spies, and the stakes are considerably higher by that point.
That's something that I'm proud of with our game is I feel like it's such a simple mechanic. initially. Like it's very easy to pick up, but I think we found fun ways to, as the game progresses, subvert and manipulate and sort of change it up. So even though you're sort of effectively doing the same thing for all 12 levels, I think it feels different as you go, and partly because the dramatic stakes change so much, like you say. But it's been interesting now that it's been out for a while. It's hard not to like over-index on Steam reviews, but seeing someone who plays it for 30 minutes, leaves a review, says, "Oh, this isn't for me, and here's why." I just want to like shake them and say like, "Oh, but if you just give it a little longer, it changes up and becomes more than that."
Happens. The thing that you want does happen.
Well, and I think sort of a game design lesson learned through this is that's why so many, I think, especially RPGs, give you a taste of like pairing. Like I'm thinking of the sequence with Cloud and Sephiroth early on in Final Fantasy VII. You get to sort of see what a fully leveled up character feels like and looks like.
The most obvious case of that would probably be Luffy and the Fortress of Doom on the SNES, where the first level of the game is literally the last level of a game that didn't exist yet. It's 100 years before, and you're facing the last boss as the descendants, as the ancestors of the characters that you eventually play, and that gives you a real taste of exactly what it is to play as end game. Okay, here's all your big spells. Here's what you will be able to do eventually. Yeah,
the promise of things to come. We had in an earlier draft, we had we called it the Nightmare Prologue, which was a similar version of that, where the choices you make, everything's going wrong, everything's gone to shit, and the place is destroyed. Now we have an introductory monologue that kind of does a similar thing, but
that's like more of a traditional cutscene beginning. But we actually recently shared the very sort of rudimentary placeholdery art version of that early sort of prologue, and it's been fun to have people who played the game be like, "Oh my god, it's so cool to see how janky and sort of placeholdery that early version is."
I think that, both of you have experience working on stage and writing for stage. And of course, writing anything involves a massive level of problem solving, where you write something and you go through and say, "Oh, that doesn't make sense," and you have to figure out a way to fix that. But in terms of video games, and especially point and click adventure games, I imagine that it was probably challenging and rewarding to learn how to design and write puzzles that didn't just make sense, but were also genuinely entertaining for the player when they figure them out. And that, I feel that the shifts at the guard shed work really, really well with that kind of puzzle.
Yeah, it's funny, Jono. Like my experience with video games, I did not, when I was brought in to help write, I was not exactly sure what Scott meant. My experience was like, okay, what do you write? People walk around and hit things. Like you mash the button, you kill the thing. Like, what writing is there even? Boy, mistaken.
Did he put you through like a boot camp of playing LucasArts adventure games?
Yes. There we would have meetings where Scott would come over. All right, I've got a PlayStation. You go to the PlayStation store. Like this one. Don't play them all. Just play a few minutes, get a feel. Just play a whole bunch of these games. He really helped build my personal library of what to look for and what video games actually have to offer. I was really surprised later on. It felt by the end like writing a script for a film, like for an episodic TV show. It did not feel very dissimilar from that, which really surprised me.
It's the language of video games. It's a fascinating thing. There's a YouTuber named Rasputin, and he had a series of videos called what this game is like for someone who doesn't really play video games. So basically, in the earlier days, he would make his wife, who was not a gamer at all, play like, I don't know, Hollow Knight or play Breath of the Wild. And he would observe her and I guess take notes. Apparently they made it because they're married now, which is good because that seems like something would break up a couple real easy. But it was fascinating to watch these videos because you really get a sense of the language of video games and how people who have played them for years. I mean, Scott, you and I have talked about classic adventure games. We bonded over that in the early days, how much we loved them. So that language, the language of adventure games and how those puzzles work and verb wheels and things like that, that just comes naturally to us. We don't even need to think about it. So if we're plunked down in front of an adventure game, we can be like, all right, what's the interface? Oh yeah, okay, I recognize this is similar to this game, and we can just go off and play it. But someone who has never encountered that before might have a struggle with being like, okay, I click on the item and then the item clicks on the character and what? So I think that's a really interesting thing, Jer, that your background was obviously not in video games and having to learn the language of point and click adventure games in order to be able to effectively write for them.
Yeah, and a real difficulty, a fun puzzle that we had was writing dialogue where the audience won't has a whole bunch of different branching dialogue trees. Like, I'm used to writing dialogue where, well, yeah, person A says this to person B, they respond, the audience sees everything. But in this, it's like, well, what if they do this what if they go in this sequence of events? Does it still make sense? Finding out, do things. So going through all of the different permutations of, well, what if you did this first and then did this? And now your whole beautiful scene that you came up with, Jeremy, is now garbage because it ends up being a circle, or you hear the same thing 3 times and nobody wants that. So it was a fun challenge to find the paths.
And having a threshold for a bit of doubling up, like, okay, well, if you find that information out 2 ways, as long as they say it different enough both times, it's not too alienating to the player. But I'd say one of the core things that Jeremy and Matt were brought on to do was, I feel like comedy in games is really challenging. And I mean, that's when people are asked, like, oh, what's your favorite funny game? I think the classic Monkey Islands come up a lot, which is interesting because they're so old at this point. I mean, the newest one came out recently, but just that people still hold these sort of 20, 25-year-old games up as like the pinnacle of like comedy in gaming. To me, that says how hard it is to get it right. And that's, I think, the sort of the one of the greatest achievements of our team, and I'll give most of that credit to Jeremy and Matt, was like, how do you make comedy work when you're giving the control of timing over to a player, where comedy is timing?
I think that's a big reason. Like, the game is fully voice acted, and I think that was a big part of it, is the amount of timing we could control, we wanted to, but with the audience being in charge of what they want to hear, kind of curating your own story. Finding that balance of, we couldn't have like a setup and a punchline from 2 different, they kind of had to be within the same character's speech. Otherwise you could have massive holes in things, and it's hard to make things land that way.
The way I've always looked at, Scott, I think that you might appreciate this given your background working with improvisational companies. The way I've always looked at branching dialogue in video games, it's almost a form of managed improv for the player. Whereas, yeah, you guys know exactly what the responses are going to be, but you really do need to be able to create that that feeling of spontaneity and call and response that is inherent in improv, like Second City Improv. You need to be able to simulate that in a way that is believable, natural, and makes the player feel like they're genuinely contributing to this conversation, even though really they only have a choice between 4 various dialogue options.
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. And like our game comes in at, I think it's 176,000 words. And it's sort of an iceberg situation. If you do one sort of linear playthrough and never look back, you're seeing probably 65% of what's there. So there's a huge sort of font of text and content. And that's, I think that's, again, going back a couple of your great points, Jono, back to the Lucas Pope thing, which is like Papers, Please is all about sort of relentless tension and sort of a foreboding grimness. I think we want, the thing we wanted to sort of mine from the 90s LucasArts games wasn't so much the mechanics, but it was just like those games are so freaking charming and like just delightful. So wanting to sort of make this game that sort of keeps the player, even though there are dramatic stakes, like you alluded to, like the back half of the game, you're at war and people are dying. It's still sort of the overriding sort of feeling is of satire and humor. and that's why we have pretty gentle game overs, pretty sort of accessible rewinds to reward the player who is like, oh, I love this character. He's so freaking funny. What else is there? What else? What if I use this other tool? What if I tease them relentlessly instead of trusting them? So I just feel like, and again, props to Matt and Jeremy for creating this sort of richness, even if it's sort of like an illusion, like Jeremy alluded to, like there are sort of only X number of choices. You have a finite number of sort of action points to spend per turn. So there's usually multiple ways to sort of get the same clue and get to the same sort of solution. But I think there is lots of depth. Obviously, there's 176,000 words of depth, but also this feeling that like it's even bigger, even deeper, and that this world is sort of more expansive than our little indie game is.
Can I ask you both what your favorite puzzle in the game is?
I got to give a lot of credit to Matt, my other writing half. But in the latter half of the game, we added a puzzle element where it's basically coming up with the right combination of admitting, or it's for the on the war front. You are drafting basically a 3-person army, and depending on who you say yes to and say no to, this combination of 3 unlocks either you win the fight or you lose the fight. One of the characters in this particular in the sea battle is a man with a particularly vicious pet fish. And I just and the whole time Lil was like, so you want to enlist? No, not me. The fish is who is. And your choices there, that character brings me a lot of joy.
And it's so that, I mean, that's a good puzzle, because they're like basically 20 minutes, at least 20 minutes prior, you've gotten a sort of a piece of information. The clue for that is there's this potential for a sea monster, and if you draft, or if we find this sea monster, we need to make sure there's no one else in the water. So the player sort of has to make the deductive leap that, in fact, this terrifying pet fish that just looks like a goldfish is the sea monster that the game has sort of telegraphed. And that's in terms of sort of the puzzle design of Lil Guardsman, I felt like I often had to be the heavy, as Jeremy's coming up with sort of brilliant content, and so is Matt, and Matt's doing his sort of like evil genius or mad scientist brain, and I had to be the one being like, is it fair? And where is sort of the source of truth for this puzzle? How is the player going to know?
At what point? We didn't want people to feel like, well, that's just random. There had to be something that led you to at least take the leap that I think this is what the writer, what I'm being led towards.
This might not end up in the podcast. I don't know. Are you two aware that there is a Lil Guardsman wiki online?
Yes, that was the discovery. I mean, seeing what people are sort of doing with the Lil Guardsman stuff online has been such a weird joy as people sort of run with it. And there's a YouTube video that's like a fan theory video that's like really well made. And it's amazing because this clear, very nerdy, passionate fan has sort of taken a bunch of things that we definitely talked about and think about. And as we think about sort of more Lil Guardsman content beyond the base game, like this person is right on the money, but this person is also like digging into sort of funny random Easter eggs in the backgrounds and sort of digging into them and ascribing value to these things that like are just sort of flavor. So
the skull count, just looking at, there was, they posted about, or in the video, they intimate that people who have skulls, there's a tie-in between, I forget what exactly he uses for it, but just noticing that the people who have skulls either on their costume or in their possession tie together in this conspiracy theory. It's very conspiracy theory, which is amazing to have for the game in our fantasy world.
Our fandom is like teeny tiny, but like the fact that there's like a fan fiction out there that I'm afraid to look at, but it exists. Just it tickles me, and we've been there's some really great fan art too, and some really brilliant artists creating Lil Guardsman inspired fan art. It's just such an honor, and I think especially with indie games, and with a project that started so sort of inauspiciously like ours. Like the fact that it's gone so far away from just us and people we know, like it's so far flung, is such a dream come true.
That for me is the big difference between theater. I'm used to doing performances for people in a room that are together, that have gathered, and it doesn't really stretch too far beyond the boundaries of that. To have the international outpouring of people from around the world enjoying the game and enjoying it in their own way and creating their own things based on it, like kind of like we were doing with our animators, is just that loop of they put things out there and we see that, and it's really incredible.
That is really cool.
Our game is it's localized in not the audio is just in English, but all the text is in you can play it in German, in simplified Chinese, and in Spanish. And it really seems like sort of the Spanish speaking world has really embraced the game. So there's some huge playthroughs with Spanish streamers and content, or Spanish speaking streamers and content creators, and that's such a trip.
Yeah, as I understand it, Germany loves adventure games. During the late 1990s, early 2000s, Germany was one of the only places where adventure games were still it was a thriving genre.
I definitely get to sort of obsessively check the Steam backend, and sort of there's a tool that shows the console sales, and watching the geography of where people are playing the game is so fascinating. And I from what I'm seeing, Jono, definitely Europe loves adventure games in a way that a lot, yeah.
Well, I mean, some of the best adventure games of the early 2000s and 2010s, they came out of Europe, and they're still coming out of Europe, to be honest.
Absolutely. Though I would say that translating comedy into other languages, or even into other English speaking cultures, is an interesting exercise.
It's fascinating you say that. I just recorded, this is not going to be up by the time this gets up. I'm going to tease a future episode because it's going to be an episode at a time. Hillary at the site and I just recorded a random book club episode where we talked about Legends of Localization Book 3 Undertale, which detailed how localizers localized Undertale into Japanese, and the process of going through and like dissecting the humor and figuring out, okay, this is going to work, this isn't going to work. Why is it's a fascinating book. Localization is not easy.
No, I remember one thing especially for the comedy, we were constantly getting like turns of phrase or puns, things like that. Like so much of our typical bread and butter, our typical fare would just we would have to come up with different versions of it. It was good to have somebody who was able to, Italo, our chief programmer, be part of having our team be international that way helped, that they could say like, I don't know what that means. I don't understand. There isn't a word for this. And it helped us get ahead of the ball on that. So we didn't have at the end, after having written everything, like, oh, none of this works. Oh dear. Okay.
Well, and I'd say we definitely early on, he said, guys, don't do puns. Like puns don't translate. I'm going to try to save you some pain. And we definitely up. There's plenty of puns in Lil Guardsman. But I'd say one of the weird jobs that I sort of took off everybody's plate was the localization team. They're called game scribes, and they work on tons of huge titles. Their various translators would sort of prep a spreadsheet, and I would wake up every morning and look at the new questions and then decide what I could take or what I would sort of farm out to Matt and Jeremy, to like stuff like, why are you talking about share here? Or what does the cut of his jib mean? And some poor individual desperately trying to make the cut of his jib work in Chinese. And anyway, so I have a lot of love for people who for people who work in localization. And I really don't think, I know there's a lot of fear and concern about AI sort of just gobbling up that industry. And there's no way that the kind of subtlety that we needed, I don't think you can train an AI to do that.
Well, there's another really interesting book released by the same guy. It's another in the Legends of Localization series. It's called Press Start to Translate. And this is before AI, but it's similar. He decided to do a brand new translation of Final Fantasy IV using Google Translate. And he got, when he did it, it was just when Google was transitioning over to a new model. So we actually got two different versions of the translation. and it is a train wreck, like absolute disaster. So I agree with you. AI probably will make the job easier, but I don't think it's certainly going to. It's not a job that I think is going to be on the chopping block. Scott, I imagine that you were probably no one's favorite person when they discovered that they needed to localize an entire Disney song pastiche.
That's definitely. I don't know if I think that one worked okay, because I think
really
with lyric writing, I feel like that forces you into sort of more direct communication and maybe clearer images. So yeah, I don't think that one pinged them badly.
Disney princesses are the universal language.
If you had to then sing the translation, then you'd have a real problem on your hands.
Yes. Just for those who are curious, Scott, I've given a little bit of your thing, but like you've written multiple musicals off the top of my head. Through the Gate, Misfortune, Princess of the Tower.
Yeah, that was a kid's show that I did. That's a deep cut. Good for you.
Yeah, John. Well, I'm cutting deep in this one. We've worked together tons of times. I assistant directed a production of Merrily We Roll Along, and you were the music director. So with those credentials established, you were the composer of the game too.
Yes.
Which the music is very, very strong. But you also, as one of the characters, I think Chloe, was just a transparent Disney princess pastiche, except she's an arsonist.
Oh yeah, she's a sociopathic sort of murderer, and it's obvious. Like it's not a tough one to sort of figure out, but I think that's the joke. The joke is she is literally singing delightfully at you that she's a homicidal maniac, and that bit, which I think we knew people would like it. Like I think we knew Chloe would be a hit with people, and I think she's one of the top 5 NPCs for folks in the game. Like that interaction is a sort of microcosm of my relationship with my creative partner, Artiom, who is extremely cultured and sees a lot of, consumes a lot of theater, like plays, not non-musicals. And he's a cultured dude, and he just hates musical theater. So in our 20 years of friendship, it's like, oh, dude, come out and see this show that I wrote, or come see this show that I'm conducting. And he'll come politely. And after the show, I'm like, okay, was this the one that turned you? Do you like musicals now? And no musical will ever turn him into a musical fan. So when Lil's like, I think this would be faster if you weren't singing at me, or just because you're singing this doesn't make any of that remotely okay. That's just Artiom. That's just my co-writer coming through Lil, which I love that's sort of immortalized in the game.
That's really funny. Outside of this, who sings her? Who's singing her? Or who is her voice? Do I know her?
Well, it's actually my wife Tringa who sings that, and she's got there are a couple of singing, like tiny singing characters in the game, but any female character that sings in the game is my wife Tringa.
Okay, so let's for the purposes of this conversation assume that development is almost done. You have finally reached the point where the question stops being, are we going to finish this game, and starts becoming, oh, we're going to finish this game. And at that point, I imagine that it would be a relief, but also it starts to set a lot more fires. For example, tracking down bugs becomes, I imagine, the fun part of development. And you have to start looking for a publisher if you're an indie dev. Just before we talk about the developer or the publisher thing, I'm curious, are there any features or characters that you couldn't get into the game because of time or resources constraints?
We had a whole third act.
Jer, I'll let you finish it, but I'll sort of cue it up as Artiom and I, as sort of co-directors of the game, were also the destroyers of dreams, because we were sort of the only people who were the most zoomed out, managing the scope and looking at the timelines, looking at budgets. So yeah, I'd say maybe, and Jeremy, you might correct me if I'm wrong, maybe 6 months before the end of sort of production, the end, we definitely were staring down the barrel of, we've got too much stuff. We're not going to get to the end.
Well, we found a stronger ending with this, but we had originally planned for it to the game to proceed in 3 acts at the end of what is currently the game, to branch off into now the amount of time travel you've done with your trusty chronometer. Doing time loops has resulted in a multiversal fracture where all of these different versions of different people you could have let into the gate kind of collide. Uh, it was pretty nebulous. I'll be the first to admit our idea was basically wrote multiverse of madness question mark, and but that's where we were heading towards. And there, like, the game is driving towards that direction. And I think we cut it at the point where, like, it either would burst out into this multiversal thing or you contain it. So we were able to wrap up the second act in a way that felt very much like this is a very strong finish point, rather than we could burst out and try to throw spaghetti at the wall for some more. But I think it was a much stronger choice to finish strong rather than let's run and sprint and try to overextend.
Well, and I think that was a relief to the programmers, a relief to the art team, and sort of like I said earlier, like that kind of constraint, which again feels like you're blocking something or saying no. I'd say that's what like unlocked a good ending. Like having that limitation meant that, like, okay, we know the shape of it. How do we make this awesome?
Scott, as the destroyer of dreams, you actually managed to avoid a pitfall that Disney gleefully jumped into with the multiverse. So good on you.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks.
The more
Boggy ain't got nothing on you.
The more I hear your description, it kind of, rather than destroyer of dreams, which does have a slightly negative connotation, it feels kind of like pruning a bonsai tree a little bit. Like everything, like you could let things grow out, but by pruning things back, you make what you have more beautiful and more sturdy and stable. And
yeah, but that's from the point of view of the people playing. From the point of view of the bonsai tree, no one likes to be pruned.
Well, and it's funny. I had a
Christian destroyer of limbs,
pruner of dreams.
Pruner of dreams.
I had occasion to go back and play the vertical slice, play the demo that we pitched the game to publishers with, and I was actually a little shocked at how close it is. Like the game got better in every way, but mostly the game we made is the game we said we were going to make, and in terms of themes and in terms of story too. So. As pruner of dreams, which I will now add to my business card, I also think it was
co-founder pruner of dreams.
It was like Artiom and I sort of had a pretty clear vision of themes and a clear vision of what we wanted it to be. And it's way better than that and way more than that because of all the creative voices we sort of brought into the tent, like including the programmers, including our sort of our dev talent. Like, if you look at the credits of the game, there's a lot of game designers, like a lot of like the job you were hired to do plus game designers, because we just had this really fun, creative sort of digital room where we were all sort of, I think, while being respectful of everyone's sort of zones, like good ideas came from everyone, which was really cool. And I hope even as we get bigger and even into the future, we can hold on to that. Like, oh, like just because you're a background artist doesn't mean that you can't comment on story or this puzzle or whatever.
Well, and Scott, I'll commend the way that you ran the, I want to say rehearsal room. I'm not sure what we call it. The way you ran the, we would have weekly meetings where we would take one of the days, one of the guard shifts, and Matt and myself typically would read the lines, would read through the characters, and we would have different people in different departments, either the animation or the programmers, play as the audience, as the player, and tell us, like, okay, what do you want to do? Do you want to use a tool? Do you want to keep talking? And they would get to see kind of the shape of a turn while hearing who these characters are and what this world that they are creating, what it feels like and what the tone is for things. And I think that collaboration between departments really help make the game as cohesive as it feels and how I feel it is.
And I imagine that is a strength of an indie dev as compared to somewhere like, well, Ubisoft, where, yeah, maybe department heads are talking together, but like rarely I imagine do the people that are doing the work, graphic designers or writers, they probably don't get as much contact as you guys got with each other.
I wonder though, with like thinking of the two of my favorite games from last year, like the Remedy team with Alan Wake 2, or even like the Larian team, those games are so like sparky and creative that I wonder if even at their huge scale, if they do have that sort of collaborative spirit, or I hope they do, or I wonder if that's why. Yeah.
Well, I imagine they're outliers. Like, my favorite thing about Remedy is Remedy are essentially the video game equivalent of a repertory theater. Like, every single game stars like the same people, maybe playing different characters, but playing like similar roles and things like that. Like, you're always going to be able to spot Courtney Hope is playing two different characters in Quantum Break and in Control. And I just, as an actor, I just friggin' love that. Where it's just like, okay, this is clearly a much more collaborative and theatrical style of game than most. And you can certainly see that in like musical performances, like the maze sequence in Control, or Poets of the Fall being featured in all of their games. Poets of the Fall are so damn good. I love them. Anyway, sorry, I need to bring it on to the end because we're approaching the end, and I just want to touch on a few things. Scott, you brought up sending the demo off to some publishers. You got one. This is so far I know that there probably were many pitfalls along the way, but so far it sounds like things were going pretty well. And then right at the end, you guys hit what I would argue is the nightmare scenario. Can you share a little bit about what happened with your publisher?
Yeah, I mean, first I just want to say like everyone who sort of touched the game from left to right and helped it get out the door. There have been great people who have sort of worked for all of the entities that have intersected with Lil Guardsman. And I don't have too much to say about it, other than I feel like we had a bit of a charmed experience in that Artiom and I, as sort of gaming is our second career, we sort of came from different spaces, had never made a game before, self-funded, assembled the prototype and yeeted it out into the world, sent it to publishers, and found some folks at Versus Evil, a now defunct, sadly, publisher who believed in us, who liked the idea, liked the game, thought they could help us do it, and they did. And then we just got clobbered by sort of what's clobbering everyone in the gaming industry, which sort of, I think, really sort of started rearing its head last fall. And then, the Versus Evil publishing publisher was shuttered right before Christmas, 3 weeks before our game was set to launch, which was harrowing for us. But then again, the parent company or Tiny Build, who sort of took over publishing duties, like great folks there, supported us, and thankfully the game shipped, and the rest is history.
I remember when it happened because I got a press release and I was like, where do I know this? Oh my God.
No, it was challenging, and I wouldn't wish what happened on other folks, and it's not unique to us. Like it's
a thing that's happening in the video game industry right now. And to be fair, has always happened in the video game industry, but right now especially, it's hitting folks real hard.
And you look at the sort of changing shape of the video game industry, and I think things got inflated at the beginning of the pandemic. Everyone was captive at home, and sort of the number of users and the number of consumers ballooned. So there was a bunch of hiring that happened, and with the Embracer stuff and a bunch of sort of big deals. There's a lot of challenge for folks, and my heart breaks every time I sort of come online and see another press release from a studio that's shuttering. And I think there's some hope and some optimism that we're shifting out of that, and we're sort of, things are getting back on track. But right now it's still pretty grim, sadly. But like I said, we had great folks supporting us sort of right up to the end of Versus Evil, and then people who sort of picked up the torch and helped us get our game launched
to the finish line there. Yeah.
I don't know, Jared, what was your, again, being as diplomatic as you can, what was that experience sort of from the outside?
If you want to, we can just bleep you out using chocobo squawks if you have.
Sure, you have that. It was just scary. It just was scary that it felt like there was a chance that everything being done and ready, like we were ready. And there was a moment like, well, without a product, does that mean it just is going to sit? Is it going to be in limbo? Like will we have to move everything around? And luckily that wasn't the case. But And just the timing, man. It was like a week before Christmas. Like it's just a really awful time to get this news for everybody, man. Like it
Mm-hmm.
just yeah, it was sad, but fortunately we were in a place that we were able to get our game out into the world.
Mm-hmm. And you got by it, thank God. Um, I wanted to move on to something a little bit happier now. So regardless, you guys got through it. And it was a super stressful time, but then you released the game. Now, I'm going to compare this to something that the three of us know extremely well, which is an opening night in theater is probably one of the most nerve-wracking experiences you can have in the world. There's nothing worse than standing on stage and delivering what you think is the funniest line in the show, and then just to hear nothing from the audience. And you're just like, oh no. And also, when you work on something that hard for that long, it's easy to lose perspective on it. Like you think it's good, you really think it's good, but you can't be sure until you get it up in front of people. And I imagine that was very much the same experience here with releasing Lil Guardsman out to the world, and to be like, okay, our fortunes rely on online reception, on reviews from outlets. What was that like on the day you released the game?
Well, Scott, do you want to talk about the actual the moment where like, all right, it's time to, are you ready to release?
Well, we gathered in my living room to push the button a little bit early, like maybe 10 minutes early, and like sort of pushed the Acme plunger, and it didn't go. So again, we didn't have the correct permission set up. So
exactly like an Acme plunger.
Yeah. So we're 3, 2, 1.
Nothing.
Nothing happened. Nothing happened at all.
But again, thankfully, we'd budgeted that time, and sort of it went out into the world. And again, our game is, I think of our game as sort of the little engine that could. And we always knew that it's kind of a niche game. It's a narrative game. It's a comedy game. But yeah,
it's a point and click adventure game.
100%. But yeah, I'd say over the course of that day, over the course of the next couple weeks, just like in theater, there's lots of people who don't read reviews. And I know some fellow sort of studio heads and game devs that are like, oh, you read reviews? Don't do that. But I couldn't help myself. So
never read the comments. Never read the comments.
So the fact that the reviews have been really positive, and that people get what we're going for, and that people sort of attach on to, like we were a tiny team, so we knew we're going to focus on this, but that means we can't focus on this. The fact that people got what we were going for and really liked it was huge. Was huge for us. Yeah. How about you, Jeremy? What was the week after like?
It's so funny because, like we've said, like I'm more used to live theater where if you've got a hit immediately, they're there. Like if they like it, they'll tell you, and you can hear them. So launching the game and then like, well, I guess I'll continue about my day, but slowly, but seeing like streamers playing it on game and hearing the people laugh at your jokes has been so rewarding, and just the amount of people who are engaging with the game in whatever way they like to is why I do theater. That's why I like performing, that's why I like storytelling. And so again, it's kind of come back to like, this is not as dissimilar as my big brain thinks. It's like, oh, video games and making movies and whatever, they're completely different things, and that's just not true. And so getting that feedback is why I love doing it in the first place. And as it's come in, that has been so rewarding and such a joy.
It's cool that the game keeps rolling. Like I'd say our game was released kind of quietly, but the fact that people are still finding it, the fact that it's like every week there's new cool stuff sort of happening for it. We were told that like our game would have a long tail, like it wouldn't be an explosive launch, but people will keep finding it for a long time, and that's definitely been true. It's been really cool that like it's been out for 3 months as of maybe a week ago, and yeah, I feel like people are still like, oh, check out this new game, and that's a good feeling.
Yeah, and I mean, it's got to feel pretty damn cool to have a very positive review score on Steam. Like really, really great feedback. I read some of the reviews prior to recording tonight. And and like most of the feedback, most of the commentary, and most of the reviews are very, very positive, as it deserves to be, because it's a really good game, guys. Like I very much enjoyed it. Clearly, I couldn't review it for obvious reasons, but like I really enjoyed it as a fan of point and click adventure games from back in the day, Papers, Please, and that style of humor. It really, really connected with me. I just thought it was a delight.
Well, thanks, Jono.
I mean, it's my pleasure. I want to wrap this up now, but before I do, I wanted to ask both of you. Now, I'm not asking you to like reveal future plans or anything like that, because I know those are very much under wrap. Tell us everything that you're doing right now. But I was curious. Okay, so Blue Skies plan. What would you like to do next? So like, what would be the next step for you guys? What would you like to explore in a perfect world? Based on what you said earlier, I'm assuming the next game will be an MMO, right, Scott?
Oh, clearly we've got that sweet indie hit budget to do a massively multiplayer. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I mean, we have a dream to do more content sort of in the universe of Lil Guardsman, and I think there's more story there. Jared, do you want to sort of opaquely hint at that?
One of my favorite things about the game is that in the process of building this world, one of the things we set out to do was we're going to plant a bunch of seeds early, and then we'll see what grow and which stories we like. But there is so much fertile ground in the world of Lil Guardsman because the people you meet tell you where they're from. So there's a lot of other like kingdoms that you haven't been to, you don't see, but in your mind you like. Hopefully they're clear enough for people that they can kind of picture what the rest of this world look like. There is a lot more story that could be done in this universe, and I've really enjoyed the process of writing for a video game. So that is something that I want to continue. But honestly, Jono, for me, it's like I'm doing theater. Like I'm on stage. I'm doing things in that world right now, and hopefully, I get invited back to the ball at some point.
I'm sorry to disappoint you. Is this the right venue to say that your services will no longer be needed, Jeremy? Is this awkward?
Based on your performance in this podcast tonight, Jeremy, unfortunately.
You're letting me go?
Sort of from the Hilltop perspective, we're out with a couple of things. Sort of right after we wrapped creative production on Lil Guardsman, we rolled right into prototyping the next game. And I think anything that Hilltop makes, there's going to be a focus on story. There's going to be a focus on humor in some way, probably not the same tone of humor as Lil Guardsman. But yeah, we're out with our next thing. And I will say that I think it is very applicable to a website called RPG Fan. That's what I'll say.
Yeah. Well, I very, very much appreciate the support. And if anyone out there is looking for a way to support us here at RPG Fan, we have a store. You can find, thank you for that transition, Scott. I appreciate that. Just rolled right into it. You can find it at www.rpgfan.com/shop. What I'd really like to direct your attention to is the collaboration we have going with Hyperplay RPG. We have the RPG Fan Review Card Collection, and that is a showcase of nearly 300 of our review cards, as you can see on Instagram and other social medias. I love this book. I have 2 copies on my shelf. One was a prototype, and the other is the actual copy. And I love this thing. It's just really cool seeing, as a fan of video game magazines from way back, it's really cool to see my name underneath reviews in a paper format. And it's a really cool book. If you're looking for a way to support us here at Random Encounter, you can do so by checking out our past episodes. Last week, we were talking about Euden Chronicle, 100 Heroes, and the new DLC for Final Fantasy XVI, The Rising Tide. Also, keep in mind, this is a horrifying thought, Not E3 2024 is going to be coming up very soon at the beginning of June, so we'll likely have an emergency episode to cover all of the news coming out, because there's going to be a lot of it. We have 2 other podcasts here at RPG Fan. We have Retro Encounter. Last week was focused on Persona 3 Reload. And we also have Rhythm Encounter, which is RPG Fan's music podcast. Next week, they're going to be looking at the music of Mario RPG, which is pretty cool. If you'd like to get in contact with us here at Random Encounter, you can do so by firing off a message at podcast@rpgfan.com. Would absolutely love to hear from you. If you have any ideas for future episodes, discussion questions, that kind of thing, please fire it off. If you'd like to get in contact with me personally, you can do so at jlogan@rpgfan.com, but you can also find me on Mastodon at jonologan@mastodon.social. Now, I am not the only person with a social media presence on here. Let me ask you, gents. Scott, where can we find you online?
I would say find me through sort of the various Hilltop and Lil Guardsman portals. So we're pretty active on whatever we're calling Twitter now. You can find us on that platform at PlayHilltop.
ElonsFolly.com.
Jesus. So we're on X at PlayHilltop. You can find our channel on YouTube, again, PlayHilltop. We're sort of every week dropping sort of behind the scenes and sort of some deeper Lil Guardsman stuff. And then finally, we're on TikTok posting silly So find us there.
Cool. And Jer, where can we find you online?
You can find me on Instagram at Jeremy Lapalme, Lapalme. It's French for the palm. That's at Jeremy Lapalme.
Excellent. There's a little bit of Canadiana for you. You gotta, for those Americans out there. And Jeremy, do you have any? I realize that our audience is not your usual audience, but do you have any projects you wanna tee up for us?
I am doing a musical right now, Discovering Alan Sherman. It's a review show of the music of 60s parodyist Alan Sherman, best known for his song Hello Mudda, Hello Fada, to be playing at the Harold Green Jewish Theatre in North York, just north of Toronto, throughout the month of June.
Cool. And since we're teasing things, we might as well, mention where you can find the game. So, Scott, where can we find Lil Guardsman online and on what platforms?
Wherever you play your games, you can probably find Lil Guardsman. You can get us on Steam. I think as of the airing of this episode is the last day of Ludo Narracon, which we're very proud to be a part of. It's sort of a digital festival of sort of story-forward and story-focused games. So if you're catching this episode early, you can get our game on sale on Steam. You can also get us on GOG.com or the Epic Store. And then we're also on Switch, PlayStation, and Xbox.
Cool. So I really, really do want to thank you, gents, for coming on tonight. We had dinner a few weeks ago. We got some real good hamburgers at Allen's in Toronto. And it was really good speaking with both of you and getting caught up. And I was like, this was like a pretty good podcast, talking about just game development and the kind of things that indie devs go through and the process of making a game. So I really want to thank you for joining me. And I really want to thank you for opening up and sharing some stories and things that you probably haven't before. It was a lot of fun.
I really hope it's of interest to the folks listening, to any sort of emerging game devs and also game lovers. I hope you enjoyed.
And I would add, to people who don't think they're game devs or developers, I wouldn't sell yourself short. You don't know that. It's a lot of work, but it crosses over with a lot of other things. You probably have a lot of the skills that you would need to be able to get started.
Well, I'm really happy with the way this podcast turned out. I'm going to be even happier with it when I cut out like all of Jeremy's stuff and it's just going to be you and me, Scott. So, yep, there's dead silence from Jeremy. Worked perfectly.
Yeah, sorry, I'd already left.
Please play Lil Guardsman. Please. My wife's about to give birth to our kid in 3 weeks, so just do it for him. Just pick up Lil Guardsman. Thank you.
That is a heartfelt pitch. That is the most heartfelt pitch I think we've ever had.
For the children.
Do it for the baby. We've never heard as heartfelt a pitch on Random Encounter as we just heard. So again, both of you, thank you so much for joining me tonight. And to everyone out there listening, whatever you're playing, have fun.